知道點樣拍片啊，或者甚至片都唔使拍啦，我用啲 MOOC 嘅材料做視頻啦。咁但係課室始終都要去㗎嘛。咁去到課室點算好咧？譬如教數學嘅，有冇啲咩意見？
我用另一個説法好冇 ？OK， 我有一個經驗嘅，嗰、個唔係 flip 嚟嘅，但又係 flip 嚟嘅嚇。我教學咁耐咧，係好少成功嘅，但係咧我就近呢幾年咧，即係退休之前呢幾年咧，我就教咗地理教學法，個班係細班嚟嘅啊，咁咧就10零20人一班一年，堂係有功課，堂咧佢都要咩咧？每一堂之前，譬如星期六上堂咧，佢星期四咧就要交啲嘢俾我㗎。個功課通常係乜咧？一係咧就係將上一堂佢要做嘅嘢，佢已經要有個 summary， 佢有一個反思。有時咧佢就會揾啲料翻嚟，然之後就整理咗，然之後就交上嚟嘅。咁佢要整理一啲嘢。某程度你可以話係做緊呢個 flip 嘅，不過就唔係我講，而係佢要將佢嘅 experience 將佢整理咗出嚟。然之後咧課堂裡面咧，我哋就會拎佢啲嘢出嚟，然之後咧就去討論啦。有啲似咧 NTU 佢哋 medical school 用緊嗰種嘅 problem base 嗰種形式，俾咗嘢佢，然之後就揾佢嗰啲嘢出嚟啦。哦，原來你上堂係咁上嘅，或者你會你經驗係咁嘅樣嘅。於是我哋就喺個經驗裡面咧，就同佢咧係嵌立，我哋就會問問題，或者佢哋就會有一個分組裡面咧，佢哋自己再通過啲 sharing 咧，佢哋自己再去比較，然之後佢帶出嚟，然之後我哋再去討論。咁咧就個效果就幾好嘅。唔知係幾好，係非常之好嘅。我未試過嗰啲 student evaluation 咧係咁高嘅嚇，接近6喎，係好近6㗎啦
，100分每分。
係啦，接近6，因為我哋係1至6㗎嘛。咁咧就係完咗之後，年佢哋都依家都耐唔耐就會揾我哋食下飯啦，傾下偈。咁所以其實係嗰個我諗係你點樣利用嗰個學生個經歷去做個學習咧係好重要。咁呢個學習經歷咧，有時即係 experiences by self 咧，其實未必一定係佢真正嘅經驗，因為有時佢未要佢需要一新經驗。所以不管你係書又好，即係紙又好，或者係 video 好，你拍咗之後俾佢睇，其實你都係俾咗個經驗佢咯。咁另外一個咧就係你 flip learning 裏面咧，其實你食緊佢嗰啲即係屋企時間㗎嘛。其實我哋而家有一個問題咧，就係我哋學生翻屋企係唔做嘢啊嘛。咁如果你 flip learning 咧，你成功的話，令到佢翻屋企睇嘢咧，其實你係令到佢嘅 learning time 係長咗㗎，係咪？你 learning time 長咗咧，你正常如果 learning time 長啲咧，佢學習自然係會好啲嘅。當然你唔好令到24小時冇得瞓啦。咁但係你整體嚟講，應該嗰個效果咧係 OK 嘅。咁所以你要問我係咪一定要用 flip learning 咧？我覺得有好多唔同嘅各類型嘅方法，可能去思考去諗咧，其實可能會更加有一樣嘢。而不過 flip learning 裏面咧，據我所知咧，就係有一啲嘅學生咧，你係 flip 佢唔到啊，因為佢唔俾你 flip 啊，因為佢根本唔中意上堂，唔想去翻學，你叫佢收，我逼佢做功課難啦。咁於是你有一個問題就係你叫佢自己翻去睇咧，佢唔睇咁你點咧？即係嗰個反而咧就帶咗另外一個問題，就係喺我哋中小學裏面咧，其實有一個好大問題，就係個 motivation 點樣去 motivate 佢。所以如果就算用 flip learning 都好，個 motivation 嗰度我點樣令到佢有啲 motivation 咧？嗰個咧我諗係我哋學習裏面一個核心，即係點可以令到佢一樣嘢。咁而如果上堂裏面我哋嘅討論，我哋 interaction 係有意義同埋扣到佢嗰個生活咧，其實個 motivation 成功機會係高咗啲嘅。咁所以我又覺得其實我唔係好怕啲老師喺課堂裏面係唔識講嘢。其實老師大部分嘅 training 咧，其實都好識講嘢嘅。問題係喺我哋點解有時佢哋唔怕做咧？就係有一個原因，就係佢唔係好了解嗰件嘢究竟個運作係點樣啫。
多謝岑教授，因為時間夠咧，就唔好意思，我哋傾唔到落去添喺度。
反
頭先睇到話 time stop 啦，已經係。
阿森華你識，其實立志咁講得好好嘅。其實而家我哋做緊一樣嘢就係唔俾佢 lecture 㗎嘛。你自己諗下，然之後我哋師訓裏邊有冇唔準 lecture 之外，我哋其實攞10萬度板斧㗎嘛。所以唔係最後唔係得一個 solution 㗎嘛。 即係唔係啊 Ricky 諗緊，我哋有一個 solution， 唔 lecture 之後做嘅嘢。其實我哋唔 lecture 之後，我哋可好多好大嘅空間俾你做，同埋一定嘅 lecture 係一件好悶嘅事嚟嘅。所以係尤其是200幾人一班咧，如果你有啲 activity design 得好咧，一定成功。即係最追求唔係咁又唔會一定成功嘅。林志忠話唔會有100個學生100個都可以救到咯，但係會要救到好多人咯。所以點解 flip 喺四周圍即係好 popular， 好多人試過，即係話一樣嘢興係一定有個原因嘅。咁你又唔係一道板斧，即係 Ricky 可能逼我喺度講3樣嘢，冇3樣嘢嘅，其實就係 non-lecture 嘅方法咯，係咪啊？其實而家我哋就係咁，我哋就要 motivate 翻你去諗下以前咩，我哋帶 group discussion 要留意啲咩嘢啊？其實都係嗰啲傳統嘅嘢，完全冇新嘢嘅。所以我就話我哋裏邊冇新嘢嘅，即係做翻啲舊嘢。咁就點樣應佢反而唔睇片？咁我哋有冇應付過唔睇片唔讀書嘅學生？一定有㗎。咁咪又係嗰啲板斧。其實我都想講多兩
隨便，因為有人舉牌叫我停嘅，
係嘛？
你繼續講，
唔好理佢，睇唔到，我望住邊度啫。OK， 其實一樣嘢就係 lecture 咧，即係我想回應一樣嘢 ，lecture 本身唔係罪惡嚟嘅。你要 lecture， 好似啱先今日阿 Professor How， 佢個 lecture 係好精彩嘅，係咪 ？lecture 唔係 lecture by itself is not evil。Bad lecturing is evil。另外一個咧就係 lecturing 咧，你用得好咧，其實係要靠咩咧？靠一樣嘢好重要，就係你有冇能夠利用問題去帶動你啲 audience 去思考。所以咧，齋嘅 lecturing 咧，通常嚟講咧10零分鐘就玩完㗎啦，啲學生會瞓㗎啦。所以其實如果你話全 lecture 咧係梗係唔得啦！如果你40分鐘 lecturing 咧，一日8個鐘咧，你自己試下坐喺度啊！我問你，然之後就算揾得阿 Professor How講咧，你都頂唔順嘅。你8堂，所以中間裡面咧，你個 variety 同埋 content 咧係有唔同。咁但係咧，我個人相信，即係某一啲片段裡面嗰啲 segment 咧，你嘅要嘅 explanation 係重要，同埋好重要一樣嘢咧。點解有啲人唔中意 video 咧？知唔知點解？我就係中意，我唔係好中意 video 嘅。其中一個原因就係，正等於睇電影同埋做舞台劇係兩件唔同嘅事嚟嘅。舞台劇係你同台下咧係有 interaction， 所以好多人中意做舞台劇咧，好多演員中意舞台劇咧，因為你同台下係有即場嗰種嘅 interaction。而呢一個咧係好多老師中意，因為個師生個互動咧係極重要，所以好多人唔中意 video 嘅。唔係因為佢唔識 video， 因為 video 其實好簡單啫嘛，照講跟住錄啫嘛。嗰個唔係個問題，而係有啲老師係好怕，即係好唔中意嗰種望住一個鏡去講嘢嗰種感覺。
真係要停啦，我諗係，因為佢牌都費事舉啦，已經去到咁啊，多謝晒林教授同夏教授啦，多謝。
多謝晒3位教授嘅分享，請各位就座。聽完香港學者嘅分享後，不如我哋聽下嚟自芬蘭嘅情況同埋經驗啦。I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Finnish Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong Education Committee Chairman, Mr. Sture Payton. The topic is how Finnish e-learning fit into Hong Kong school.
Good. Right, good afternoon, everyone. You have to switch to English now, I'm afraid. My Cantonese isn't so good. So I'm going to talk about education from Finland, but basically I'm the chairman of the FinChem Education Committee here in Hong Kong. I'm also the co-founder of a startup company called Polkini, which is an education company based in Finland and now here in Hong Kong. So today I'm going to talk about 3 things. I'm going to talk about the Finnish culture and how it affects education, which is super important to understand. I'm going to talk about new approaches and concepts in Finland today. And I'm going to also talk about aspects of EdTech in Finland. So there are two different perspectives I'd like to look at in terms of the approach to education. One's based on collaboration, and one's based on competition. And in terms of the Finnish approach, it's very much like this. It's based on collaboration, meaning everyone helps everyone else to succeed. If I may say, my view of the education system in Hong Kong and Asia in general is one of competition rather than collaboration. So if we take the term we and me, it's kind of like that. There's a we approach to education, and there's a me approach to education. And certainly as far as Finland is concerned, it's about we. And if we take the term flip, we've been using flip quite a lot in the last few talks, we will flip between me and we. Because sometimes it's we, and sometimes it's me. Point being, there has to be a we at some point. And the reason I say that is that, in my view, in the 21st century, you have to be able to move between collaboration and competition, certainly in terms of the working environment. So how to collaborate is actually a very important thing to understand. The challenge is the speed of change outside school is much faster than the speed of change inside school. And that's the same in Finland. That's probably universal in that context. So I have a little concept called the learning crossover. And it goes kind of like this. My belief is that when we're all young children, we have a high level of curiosity. There's lots of, but what if, but why not? Lots of those sort of questions. But that curiosity times kind of gets less and less and less as we go through education. We kind of replace curiosity with answers. And that affects how we behave later in life. And this is I'm sure you've probably seen before, this is kind of a nice little diagram, which means even though we all take the same test, we're all individuals. We all have different skills. And this is kind of the fundamental principle in Finland, where of course there are hardly any tests, I must say, in education. There's a good reason for that. So there's a statement by a guy called General George S. Patton, no relation to me, but he was an American general. And he said, if everyone is thinking the same thing, someone's not thinking. And the point about this is maybe we aren't all thinking the same thing, but we're scared of saying. And that comes down to culture. Now I've taken that statement and looked at a different way of saying it. If everyone's being taught the same way, someone's not learning. And I think that's really important, because we don't all learn the same way. Now this is a little, I have to say, my little view of the world, where I believe that no one will know what the jobs are in the future. I doubt anyone in this room could say what the skills are required in 10 years' time. I certainly couldn't. So I think collaboration in education is really important. I also think learning how to learn is really important. Because in the future, we don't know what to learn. We don't know yet. We do have to learn how to learn. And I think collaboration and competition is something that will happen in the work environment. If I take an example of most startup companies today who are very small, in order to compete, you have to collaborate. So collaboration is something around us all the time. Now let's take about what happens in education in Finland with respect to teachers. Only 10% of the people who apply to be a teacher are accepted. 90% are rejected. Not because they're not good academically, it's just the demand to be a teacher is so high. And those 10% that are accepted are done so on the basis of having passion for teaching, having a desire to teach, and seeing teaching as a lifelong process, meaning a lifelong career. So if you imagine in Finland, only the top 10% are accepted, and every one of those has to have a master's degree. If you haven't got a master's degree in education in Finland, you can't teach. And it takes 6 years in Finland to get a master's degree because they do a lot more practical work. But you then take that 10%, which has been happening for 25 years, and you think of what's happening now inside the education system. You're taking the top 10%, not just academically there, but with a passion and desire to teach. And that's happening for 25 years. So you can see why Finland is successful in education. Plus, of course, the culture is about collaboration. This is also important. There's no school assessment. There's no teacher assessment. There's no standard test focus. Students are assessed on a continuous basis because the belief is the teachers have the skill to do so. And the teachers are also responsible for developing curriculum themselves. The other thing that's important to understand with Finland is there's no shadow education marketplace. There's no private schools. There's no tutoring centres. There's no cram schools, which means can't remember anything. Just the public system, one system for the whole nation. And the reason this exists is that Finns have only got 5.5 million people. And the issue with that is that they believe every single person is important. And they see education as a key element of the growth of the nation. So you have one system, everyone working together. This is also important. In Finland, people talk about teacher as they would do a lawyer, doctor, and the big thing is that parents 100% trust teachers. I'm not sure it's the same here, but in Finland, teachers are trusted because people recognize the importance. Another aspect is the schools in Finland. Finland's a huge geographic nation. It's bigger than the UK, but only 5.5 million people. So you would go to, as a child, your nearest school, probably in your village or town. Now the difference between all the schools in Finland in performance is less than 6%. So you can go anywhere in school in Finland and you are pretty much guaranteed the same level of education. Not the same here. Another point, and I think is really interesting, if I compare Asian culture to this culture in Finland, is the view of vocational learning. In Finland, when children are 16, they make a choice. They can either go general education, which is academic, or they can go vocational education. It's around about 50-50. But the ones that go vocational usually come back to university at 18 and do a degree. So the workforce in Finland is very balanced across the whole sector. Lifelong learning is something that's also very important in Finland. Everyone sees learning as a lifetime activity. Now, I could be wrong here. My view of Hong Kong and Asia in general is if I say academic, people think here. If I say vocational, people think here. Kind of, you do vocational if you're a failed academic student. It's not the same in Finland. We don't have the same mentality. But you cannot copy and paste the Finnish education system into the Asian environment because the culture is completely different. And that's the most important thing to realize is collaboration, be competition, means everything's different in the aspect of education. So I think it's fair to say that to some degree, education reflects the culture of wherever you are. And because the culture here is predominantly about competition, and that's what's built Hong Kong in the past, that also means education is about competition. But also remember this, in Finland, they pay high taxes. It's not the same in the context of Finland and Hong Kong. It's a different decision. In Finland, if you had dinner with somebody who was the top ice hockey star, they wouldn't tell you. They wouldn't say, hey, by the way, I'm the top ice hockey star in Finland. They're very humble people. They never brag, which is a good and a bad thing. I'll explain later why. Well, this helps the education side, but of course, it's easier to fail in Finland than in Hong Kong because society is there to help you more because you're paying more taxes. So it's a different aspect to understand that dynamic. The other aspect in Finland is they're very strong on equality and equity. So people who need support get support. Gender equality has been there for a long, long time. So you'll probably find in most government departments, most companies in Finland, pretty much an even mix of male and female. And this is a little fact most people don't realize. In 1906, Finland became the first parliament in the world to adopt gender equality, which means women not only have the right to vote, but to be elected. That was in 1906. That was 100 years ago. So they've always had this culture of being equal. Now, how is this reflected in the education system? In Finland today, 84% of people will have an upper secondary certificate, but more than 40% of the population have a degree because education is free. And I don't know, I haven't worked out yet, but from my experience in Finland, the number of PhDs per population must be huge because people go on to do further research and further study because that's seen as something that's very important to them. Now let me talk briefly about the concept of flipped classroom in Finland. This is kind of how the Finns see it. So basically what you're doing is you're concentrating on higher level thinking skills. So rather than it being about remembering and understanding, you're thinking about creating, evaluating, and analyzing. So you're moving away from traditional thinking of problems. And in terms of the advantage of flipping, probably for me, the centre one is the most important. It makes learning central rather than teaching. The whole idea in Finland is to try and get children to become self-motivated learners, to want to learn, to have fun learning. And that's the concept behind most of the things that happen in Finland. I think this is also important to understand. In Finland now, there's a lot of talk about how to think of schools of the future because of technology. So to use spaces differently, to use locations differently, and to try and think about education in a different sort of way. So the concept is learning across time, places, and spaces. So maybe in the future, we don't have school buildings. I don't know, maybe we don't have schools. How do we learn? Where do we learn? And I think these are the sort of questions now that are being asked in Finland. They're not answered yet, but they're asking the questions. And this is a little diagram from the city of Espoo, who are also looking at these sort of concepts. So the idea is school as a service, distributed into different locations. Maybe it could be museum. It could be a core schooling space, or something different. So they're pushing the boundaries about what it means to be a school. Now, of course, remember, this also requires teachers to feel comfortable with change. Teachers to feel comfortable with the unknown, which means the teachers have to feel confident in their own skills to accept this different way of adapting to situations. And one of the new things that's happening now in Finland is this issue of phenomenal learning. And basically, the concept is, in Finland, they are looking to no longer teach subjects, but to teach subjects together as a whole. So you're going to be learning by association, which is a better way to learn. So rather than learning one aspect, you learn a number of aspects in one project. It could be European Union. You might do maths, geography, science all together about the European Union. But the point being, it's going to be different. And I didn't realize until I checked again, but the bottom statement's important. So for the first time, it's compulsory for schools to organize one such module at least once every school year. The core curriculum obliges schools to plan and implement these in cooperation with different subjects and involving pupils in their planning. So pupils are now going to be asked, how would you like to learn? Where would you like to learn? When would you like to learn? So this is kind of a different approach. Now, the reform aspect is really interesting. You saw before my little chart about curiosity. So the issue is, if you want to increase curiosity, allow questioning. Problem solving, link school knowledge to real life problems to encourage pupils to work together and seek solutions. If you want to raise citizens who develop society, promote inclusiveness. And the last one is also very interesting. If you want to strengthen learners' self-confidence and motivation, give constructive and honest feedback, but never humiliate or put down the learner. It's kind of easy to label people. You know, you're not as good as your sister, your friend's brighter than you, you've always been no good at this, therefore. And in Finland, they've done a lot of work on how to make sure feedback is done in a way that's not detrimental to the child's learning. So how do the Finns introduce e-learning or edtech products into schools? In Finland, there's a group called Innokas. And Innokas is linked to Helsinki University. But I think the most interesting thing about Innokas is it's been developed by teachers. There are 200 teachers who got together 15 years ago to share and collaborate on the best ideas and best solutions of how to introduce technology into schools. So imagine there's more than 200 now doing this, and they're sharing all their best practices on a continuous basis. So rather than one little pocket learning over here and one over here, everyone's learning at the same time. Everyone's growing at the same time. And because you've only got one system, the system's improving all at the same time. So that's a really interesting way of doing it. Now, InnoCast is something that doesn't exist here on Hong Kong. But I don't see any reason why you couldn't try and do that here. The next aspect I want to talk about is EdTech. So I have some association with this company called XEDU. And XEDU is the first dedicated EdTech accelerator to be launched in Finland. So I think you all understand what an accelerator is. It's a place where small companies go to learn how to become more effective at their business, to know what their business is. We have lots of accelerators in Hong Kong for many, many things. In Finland now, this one is dedicated purely for educational products, so educational startups. So XEDU was launched 2015. There was 120 applicants. They only took 10 companies. So they're the best 10 EdTech companies that applied. And they're not just all Finnish, they come from all over the world. We just also now taken the next 12 companies, and that program will start at the end of August. And the benefit with this particular aspect is all these companies have 150 schools to use as their experimental database. So they go to all the teachers give feedback, they check the pedagogy, they check all the activity, and they chase through that way. So they're really pushing in that context. I'm going to show you now just a few companies come through that program with things I think are interesting. There's one called Mightyfire, which is talking about mastering social skills. Now, what does this mean? It means that children give peer-to-peer feedback about how they see the interaction with each other. The teacher can then look at this peer-to-peer feedback, and the way it works is that a child would have this sort of screen, and randomly it would say, today, Stuart, you need to give assessment to Peter. And I will then be given some activity to look at. And if I say, I'm trying to assess, say, Peter for honesty, for instance, I can then assess him for that, and I can also give him a little go. Peter, I saw you doing this at this point. The teacher sees all these and then sends them out to children. So imagine a child getting positive feedback from another child on a continuous basis over a matter of months. Imagine the effect that has on the mood of the class and the self-esteem of the child. So these are some of the characterizations they use. There are over 24. And the way they would do it is they would have a little card. They would try to explain to them, in this case, what we mean by self-regulation. So it's teaching the children what aspects are used to make up a character. So they've done this program with 250 students in a city called Espoo in Finland. Age range is 9 to 11, and they've found things like this: less bullying. They've found that there's less bullying in the classroom from a teacher's evaluation. The teachers have also feel it's improved social skills and mood. Even after 1 month, they've noticed the class seeming happier. If you ask the children, they also feel it's improved their mood because they're getting positive feedback from their friends. And the way it happens is it pings on their phone. So it's like using technology to give them feedback. The children also said there's less bullying from their point of view. So that's using EdTech in a way that's not teaching a subject, but it's helping children cope with education in a much more positive way to make them feel good about themselves. And that's quite a nice way of doing it. There's a company called Bomberbot who are doing coding. I can zoom through this quickly. There's one called Revisely, which is a product that helps teachers maximize their time, which makes it much easier to mark papers in English. There's one called Seppo. And Seppo is quite interesting because Seppo allows teachers to make their own games. And the idea is you can make a game that works inside the classrooms, or you can make a game that works outside the classrooms. And what we're doing with Seppo is we're going to use Seppo in Hong Kong in a summer school project to get kids to use the technology outside of school, but the teacher always knows where the kids are. The kids go in pairs or in groups. And the idea is once they've gone and done this task, they're looking at a real life situation, then they go back and look at the theory of the situation. So they're learning from both extremes like before. Now, one of the things that we've looked at is how do you assess if an EdTech product is good or bad? There are so many EdTech products out there now. So we've set up this activity in Finland, which evaluates the pedagogical aspect and validation of the product. It does this by looking at 21st century skills, it looks at the Finnish pedagogy, and it looks at some research evidence. And the idea is to evaluate this from different perspectives. So the people who are doing this are all teachers with master's backgrounds, but they may have some specific skills in things like gamification, user interface, design, but their background is all education. And when this is done, we get a result. So in this case, like Bomber Boat we saw before, they would get a report back from this evaluation saying, is this good or is this bad? And our idea is that we will only be involved in products that actually have good pedagogy. Because there are so many products out there that claim to be good, that probably aren't very good. So how do you differentiate if you're a teacher or if you're a parent? So we're now trying to evaluate those things. There's one more slide I just want to talk about briefly, which I think is quite interesting. This is the evaluation from the World Economic Forum of global competitiveness. And Hong Kong came 7th, Finland came 8th. But what's interesting to me is when you look at the differences. So if you look at the top left-hand side there, you will see the first section actually talks about, so small, actually talks about basic requirements. So basic requirements is talking about mainly government type activities or infrastructures. Now for Hong Kong came first in the world for infrastructure, which I can kind of understand, because that's, getting around Hong Kong is super simple. It's incredibly good. This one is about, it's called efficiency enhancers. And Hong Kong came really high for goods efficiency, labor efficiency, and financial efficiency. That to me is kind of driven by competition. Competition makes you do those things. If you look at Finland, Finland came number 1 for institutions, which is government. But it also came number 1 for health and primary education. And then when you move into efficiencies, it came number 2 for higher education. But the thing I think is really interesting is if you look at the bottom one, which is actually for innovation, Hong Kong came 27th, Finland came 2nd. Now, I kind of see this as education has some relationship with innovation. If the education system is about collaboration and working together and developing things, the output of that will be innovative companies or innovation. In the Hong Kong side, it's more about competition. Actually, to be fair, what Finland misses is what Hong Kong has. If we could take all these innovative companies and make them competitive, Finland would be a super nation. So it's kind of a flip situation. But I think it's important to see that education, in my view, more and more is developing an output of innovation. And even though I'm personally now involved in innovation here in Hong Kong, so I've got my own startup, and there's lots of government money going into innovation and into startups. If I go and spend time with startups in Finland, everyone shares information with everyone else to help each other. If I spend time with startups in Hong Kong, nobody speaks to anybody. It's super secret because they're scared of losing out something. So that's a consequence of competition going too far as a mindset. So basically, that's my presentation. If you have any questions, you can catch me here at this address. You feel free to send information to me, or if you want to ask me questions, I'll try and do it later at some point for you. But thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sudhakaran. Please be seated. 多謝晒咁多位嘉賓，今日嘅會議主題議講部分已經完結，大約35分鐘之後會有唔同嘅機構、學校、學科老師就住 STEM 及反轉教室嘅經驗分享。詳細資料可以參與各位手中嘅長刊。同時，本校一樓禮堂備有茶點、展覽，供各位嘉賓、來賓休息及分享。咦，你手上嗰個咩嚟㗎？
哦，呢個咪就係而家學界最多人討論嘅 VR cardboard 咯。
你嗰個咁靚嘅？
你想要啊？大家只要填份問卷就得㗎啦。
大家喺入嚟嘅時候，派發嘅環保袋入面有一份問卷，完成問卷之後，大家只要交到禮堂 iFuture 嘅 counter 度，就可以獲得一個由大會所贈送嘅 VR cardboard 一個，數量有限，送完即止。
提一提大家，今日會議完結，大約5時30分會有接駁巴士送大家去天水圍西鐵站或九龍港鐵站。如果大家未登記的話，請盡快到1樓 iFuture counter 度登記，而上車集合地點為地下操場。
今日嘅電子學習介有會議主題議講部分已經完結，再次多謝各位抽空出席，並且提大家未簽到請到1樓禮堂為簽到。請大家現在可以根據指示到1樓禮堂交問卷、使用茶點及參觀展覽。多謝大家。
哇！我而家諗住喺度。